The article then goes on to say the message, implied if not always stated outright, is that other people are simply not my problem. And I want us to think about what the implications are to have that mindset when it comes to society at large. If we have a ton of people who cut off anyone that inconveniences them, who don't show up for their friends, who don't show up for their community, who view any type of conflict as emotional labor, what kind of society does that then create? The author goes on to say, I find this stuff tough to read. Like most people I know, I've surely hurt everybody I love at least once, plus this roommate. I talked down to him, an obvious red flag, and he did what he was supposed to do, according to the prevailing online wisdom. He acted quickly to protect himself. And then it goes back to a person has no obligation to forgive anyone for anything. He may have been reassured by some tiny internet voice. Tinny is actually the word. Or, as one inspirational quotes account tweeted over the summer, cut them off silently. They know exactly what they did. I can't say it was a huge loss. Our relationship was based almost entirely on proximity. But the advice I'm sifting through isn't just about sloughing off casual acquaintances. It's meant to apply to close friends, siblings, partners, parents. The message implied, if not always stated outright, is that other people are simply not my problem. What does that kind of individualist mindset do to us? The author then notes that nobody tracks breakups between unmarried romantic partners, let alone friends or subletters. But we do know that all types of relationships seem to be snapping. Last year in The Atlantic, Joshua Coleman, a psychologist focused on family estrangement, described advising an influx of parents whose adult children had cut them out of their lives. Carl Pillemer, a professor at Cornell University, published a book on the topic in 2020 in which he estimated that about 67 million Americans were estranged from a family member. Does this resonate to you? Are you currently estranged from anyone in your life? The article goes on to say some blame self-absorbed young people. In New York Times column last year, David Brooks employed the work of Pillemer and other experts to argue that the estrangement epidemic might be driven by a generational shift in what constitutes abuse. Difficult or distant parents redefined as dangerous. He wondered whether today's young people view the family as a launch pad for personal fulfillment, rather than the site of lifelong obligation. Brooks then painted a lonely picture of the psychological unraveling of America, working in high rates of depression and as well as the sizable percentages of Americans who feel like they do not even have one close friend and nobody that truly knows them. Lena Pearl, a clinical psychologist in New York, said her patients sometimes talk about toxic friends and the internet's advice for dealing with them. She gets the appeal. People love rules, she told me. They want to know what their responsibilities are. What do I get to say? That's it. I cut you out. And let me know in the comments, does this resonate with you? Do you feel like you've noticed this in your own life, maybe like with friends or conflicts that you've had with family members? Do you see this happening with your friends and extended network? Do you know people who have cut people out of their lives? What sort of impact do you think this is having on our society as a whole? For my global audience, is this something that you notice as well? Or does this, seem to fit more into a kind of thing that is influenced by American culture, American ideals of individualism, since America is such a capitalist-rooted culture? I know capitalism is a global system, but I wonder how much of this is spurred by the American sort of myth message that is always pushed into us, that like personal fulfillment and self-optimization is always like what you should be shooting for, and living in community with one another, taking care of others isn't your priority. And I think the author is arguing, and so many people argue, like what they're really asking the question, like what happens to us as a society when we stop taking care of each other, and when at a point of conflict, instead of resolving that conflict, which could possibly bring you closer, you just immediately cut ties with the person forever.